Having seen those remarkable photographs, we continue our conversation about race in America from the civil rights movement to the Obama era. Joining me, David Remnick, the editor of the New Yorker magazine. From Washington, Congressman James Clyburn, Democrat of South Carolina, the third-ranking Democrat in the House. Also in Washington, Eugene Robinson, columnist for the Washington Post and Pulitzer Prize recipient. I am pleased to have all of them here to talk about this very important subject. Where do we stand in the matter of race? Jim and Gene, I want to begin with this question. People say we're not in the post-racial era. Some had hoped that we would with the Obama election move towards that. Help me understand what the post-racial era looks like.
Well, I suspect that the post-racial era will only come when we don't find a need to have a discussion about these things. The fact of the matter is we are not in a post-racial era, and it will be a long time getting there. We are in an era which hopefully we can begin for the first time to discuss the issue of race in a way that will allow us to grow beyond it. I often talk about a young lady, Rowena Tobias, who down in Charleston years ago told me that she thought that South Carolina and Charleston suffered because when it came to the issue of race, people would stop talking. And she didn't think that we could ever be able to get to where we need to be unless we can have an honest discussion of the issue of race and come to grips with what we need to do to get beyond it. We keep postponing that discussion and avoiding it. And you don't tolerate people by avoiding them. You tolerate them by getting to know them.
Why do we keep avoiding it?
I don't know. I think that we've decided for some reason that race is too volatile. I don't think it is. I think it's condition that we all live with. We know what the history has been in the country, and I think there are enough adults in our society and those who aren't have enough maturity for us to accept what has been in the past and learn from it. Because if you don't, you will find yourself repeating some of those things only because you aren't aware of what the ramifications were and could be.
Gene, if we want to reach a post-racial era and we have to go through what Congressman Clyburn just suggested, how do we do that? What's the agenda for doing that?
Well, you know, I think we do have a discussion about race in this country. It's just that we have it in an episodic, frustrating, maddening, and incomplete way. We talk about race when something happens to make us talk about race. So when Skip Gates from Harvard was arrested on his porch by the white officer in Cambridge, we talked about race for a couple of weeks until the president and Skip and the officer had a beer, and then we could stop talking about it, and everybody breathed a sigh of relief. But I don't believe that we fail to progress at all. I don't believe that we fail to have a discussion. It's just that we do it in our own idiosyncratic way, full of friction, and you know, we're very disputatious about race, and we don't really want to talk about it, but we do. And I think the evidence of that is, you compare the America that I grew up in South Carolina to the America of today, and it's certainly not perfect. We certainly haven't dealt with our 400-year history of race in this country, but it's a lot better than it was.
And for me in North Carolina as well. So
you know, Charlie, when I interviewed the president, it was very clear. We had a conversation about this, and then I was outside the office after it was all done, and I was talking with David Axelrod. And the president came out, and he wanted to talk about this again. And the point that he wanted to make had precisely everything to do with the so-called conversation around Skip Gates and the Cambridge police officer. It became stunningly clear to him that the idea of speaking off the cuff about race was useless because of the baggage that one side brings to it, which is the notion of that race is all tied up with police brutality, and then the other side thinking that it has to do with a disrespect for law enforcement. It's so electric, and so it leads nowhere, that you could see that President Obama thought this whole episode, he was sorry it ever happened. And it will not happen again if he can help it.
He won't speak off the cuff about race, or what?
He feels it's only effective to talk race when he can have, a half an hour like the speech in Philadelphia,
which is what I wanted to
Jeremiah Wright. So there he can have a balanced and nuanced presentation. But these kind of off-the-cuff incidents, I think Gene is being polite when he calls it idiosyncratic. It can be even much worse.
I kind of despair that at any point, now or in the near future or in the far future, we're all going to sit down around a campfire and have a national discussion about race. I wish we would, but I just don't think that's going to happen. I think we're going to make progress in our difficult, worse than idiosyncratic, conflict-filled way, and it's going to be messy, and sometimes it's going to be painful, and people are going to say the wrong thing because it's impossible to say the right thing. But I think we can see which way the arc of history has been bending. I think it has bent in the right direction. Wish it would go. Wish we'd get there faster. But this seems to be the way we're fated to progress.
Is the president doing all that he should do because of the bully pulpit he has?
I talked to a lot of people, a lot of African Americans before the inauguration about their expectations of President Obama and the subject of race, and I think the near unanimous view was that there was a limited amount that the first black president was going to be able to do in the United States of America explicitly about race, that in a sense it was, well, you can't say it's a handicap, but in a sense it limited the degree to which he could really talk about race per se. And I think that's probably true, and that's maybe unfortunate, but what would his poll numbers be like, do you think, if at every potential occasion he were to raise the subject of race?
I think that what we have to recognize is that the roles that the entities play in this issue, when it comes to race, I tend to respond to the issues legislatively. Right. The president has to respond administrative or executively. The fact of the matter is there are others who have roles to play. The civil rights groups have roles to play. And I think that what happens today is that we often confuse those roles, and the expectations are based upon our own experiences. Now, I can appreciate the president taking the positions that he take as it relates to race. A lot of people with other backgrounds and experiences may not be able to appreciate it as much. And so I know why he's doing it, the way he's doing it, and I also know that it is necessary for him to make sure that he will be able to deal with issues as President of the United States without being accused of playing the race card.
Right. Well, the issues have changed. We're no longer talking about access to lunch counters or water fountains or even universities. We have a president who exemplifies some of this change. His access to elite institutions in this country is radically different than his predecessors in the civil rights movement who went to divinity schools or segregated schools. But I think in his mind and in most people's mind, that if he is able to make an impact on big social issues like health care, for example, that African Americans will benefit disproportionately because there are more poor African Americans than in some groups. And what's been blocking that are all kinds of political factors, to say nothing of the innate structural problem of the Senate and the way representation occurs in our system, which is all bollocks